Matthew Golden has decided to head to the NFL draft. What do I think about his draft prospects? We'll talk about it right after this. If you like what we are doing here at Campus to Canton, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. We are trying to get to 5,000 subs before the start of the college football season so we can continue to spread the good word of college fantasy football all around the world. Appreciate all of your guys' support. Matthew Golden. All right. Coming out of high school, he was not as highly rated as people may think, especially with what we saw from him at Texas this year. He was listed at 6'1", 190 coming out of Klein Kane in Houston, Texas. He was on threes, wide receiver 25, 24/7 Sports, wide receiver 25. ESPN had him at wide receiver 32, and Rivals had him at 37. Campus to Canton, though, had him as their wide receiver 10. Here is in our inaugural freshman supplemental guide ratings. This was my write-up on Matthew Golden. He was a guy that I really liked watching play at Klein Kane High School. And I thought did a lot of incredible things when it came to him creating separation within the route, off the line, his ability to track the ball very well. And as you can see down there at the bottom, I put in there that I think he is a complete wide receiver who has a chance to be a day 2 draft pick and should dominate in college. Well, he didn't quite dominate in college, and some of that I think was due to his injuries and just the offense that he played in at Houston, but overall was I would say, productive wide receiver in college. Throughout his time at Houston, again, he suffered a couple injuries throughout his time at Houston, ended up with 584 yards as a true freshman, and then just 419 in his sophomore year before coming over to Texas, and ended up being the leading receiver here at Texas with 987 yards this year. But it's more some of the advanced stats that I'm looking at that really showed you where he thrived. So if you look at where he played for the most part, in his true freshman season in 2022 with Houston, he played 95% of his snaps out wide. In that second year, his sophomore year in 2023, just 65%. And then this past year at Texas, 76%. But a lot of people like to look at that yards per route run. And you want really anything over like 1.8 is considered really good, 2 incredible. This past year at Texas, 2.10 yards per route run, 1.64 as a sophomore, 1.66 as a true freshman. Again, 1.66 as a true freshman on a G5 team that I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, had Tank Dell at that point in time, is still pretty impressive. His ADOT in that freshman year as well was a 12.1. In his final year, 13.5. Again, that sophomore year, some of his stats really took a dip because of the injuries, but was able to bounce back here, the transfer up to Texas, which a lot of people were concerned about. Overall, as an athlete at the Campus to Canton, on the Campus to Canton website, we have him in our athletic database at a 0.452 athlete, but we do have him at 21.4 miles per hour, which comes into the 76th percentile, which I think you can see at times with just how he is able to get down the field. Listed at 6'1", 195 going into the draft. I mean, I really don't know where I would rank him overall. When you talk about him from a play style perspective, like he's such a good route runner. And I do think he's very explosive. He can be used in the short and intermediate parts of the area, but he also can be used as a deep threat. And his ball tracking and hands, I think, are some of the best in this class. Like I got to see it in person at the Texas-Ohio State game. I imagine it looked great on the TV coverage. I haven't had a chance to actually watch the game from the TV perspective. But it was in the first quarter, and I believe it was on the first drive. May have been later in the game. I honestly don't remember, but Quinn Ewers threw a ball to him that he caught one-handed with the defender draped on him, literally brought it in like that. That is the kind of player that we are talking about here. He is incredible with his hands and ball tracking. Again, I think he's really good within the route, creating that separation within the route and at the catch point. Now, he does struggle at times with that physicality. I think at times he can get bullied a little bit by corners, and he's not a guy that I believe is a really big yak threat. So I don't know that you're going to get a ton of that when he ends up going into the NFL. Over his career, he had 762 yards of yak. So, I mean, he wasn't horrible there. His yak per reception, 5.2, 5.9, definitely did in his freshman year, that 6.1. I don't know if the injuries hampered him. And then I do think the injuries, right, have to be a main part of this as well. He was injured as a freshman toward the end of the year. injured as a sophomore, and then he dealt with injuries throughout his final year with Texas as a junior. And in that semifinal game, right? I mean, there was a realistic shot that if he had stayed out on the field with the way that he was burning some of those Ohio State corners early in that game, maybe Texas goes on to win that game if Golden stays healthy the entire game. So I think the injuries have to be part of the analysis here. But again, I'm hesitant to label anybody injury prone, because that was what everybody said about Keenan Allen for a long time, and then look at what he's done the rest of his career, right? So I think overall, it's something you need to have, I guess, as something in his write up here, his database, whatever you think of him. But overall, I think he's a really good player. Again, just the short area quickness is incredible to me, and I think wherever he goes, he's going to fit in well because he can play everywhere. Like, he doesn't have to be lined up on the outside; he can play in the slot as well. Right now, though, again, if I'm looking at the wide receivers in this class that I would take over him, I think you probably for sure have to have Tetaroa McMillan, Emeka Egbuka, and Travis Hunter over him. There's three. I then think he's in the argument with Luther Burden, Trey Harris, and Xavier Restrepo. So you're talking about, even if you put all three of them over him, you were talking about him being wide receiver 7. Said in that profile, I think he was going to be a day 2 pick. I think he's locked into a day 2 pick. I think right now, even though Isaiah Bond, his teammate, is more explosive and brings like this, elite trait in his speed, I think overall I would take Matthew Golden because of his ability to track the ball, his hands, route running ability. Like, I think overall he's just a more complete wide receiver at the moment. Matthew Golden's a guy I think people will overlook because he just didn't put up these gaudy numbers in college, and I think he's not going to blow people away at the combine with his testing numbers. And you're going to have the Tetaroa McMillans, who are just these big size freaks who put up incredible stats in college. Travis Hunter, Heisman winner, right? Emeka Egbuka is probably going to get a lot of talk because of what he did, and then people will scout the helmet a little bit up. Another Ohio State wide receiver coming out. Trey Harris, Xavier Restrepo also put up a bunch of stats and good overall senior seasons, where Matthew Golden, again, 900 yards is nothing to sneeze at, but overall didn't put up maybe some of the stats of some of these other guys. I think he might be a little bit of, I wouldn't say a sleeper. People will know who Matthew Golden is. But I think, again, he could become like the 7th wide receiver off the board. Maybe even some of these other guys go over him. And then in fantasy drafts, I think he might be a guy who's overlooked unless he lands in a really great landing spot. He's a guy that I would bet on. Been betting on him since he left Klein Cain High School at Houston, Texas. And I'm still betting on him as he goes to the NFL. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think Matthew Golden has a chance to be a day 2 pick? Is I would have him as wide receiver probably 4 right now, if not 5 or 4. Is that too high? Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and we'll talk to you guys again soon.